Luigi's Mansion has always been a bit of a black sheep when it comes to the Mario franchise, what with its distinct lack of Mario himself and its departure from the platforming mechanics that most people associate with the Mario Brothers. Luigi's Mansion 3 maintains this distinct identity, but smooths out the rough edges of the earlier games in the series, making for a delightfully clever experience that's full of heart. Much like the previous Luigi's Mansion games, Luigi's Mansion 3 puts you in control of the green-clad plumber in a building overrun by mischievous ghosts. This time, the mansion in question is actually a haunted hotel called the Last Resort, where Luigi and his friends find themselves lured and trapped by the hotel's owner and the newly liberated King Boo. Armed with his trusty poltergust G00, it's up to Luigi to save his friends and clean up King Boo's mess once and for all. The game's story, in true Mario franchise fashion, isn't all that complicated and isn't much to write home about as a result, but it must be said that Luigi continues to shine as the character with the most personality in all of the Mushroom Kingdom. What could be a rather predictable affair is kept entertaining entirely through the delightful animations and voice work that help Luigi stand apart from his spotlight-hogging brother, even if his responses to most situations is panicked babbling and attempting to hide. Seriously though, unique animations for every time Luigi enters a new level or gains a new item are totally unnecessary, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't love them and that they didn't give Luigi so much more personality. The rest of the game's animations and sound design are similarly fantastic, but it is hard for Luigi to not stand out seeing as he gets the most exposure. With that said, the game's enemies can be found causing trouble in a variety of ways, which serves to give these otherwise nameless, interchangeable spectres some sense of personality, and the various wails during encounters makes catching them feel really satisfying. It'd also be remiss of me to not mention GUIG, the game's most notable new addition, and its wobbly animations and constant blank stare. For a weird non-character, GUIG is brought to life with a degree of effort that I wasn't really expecting, and every time it featured in a cutscene I found GUIG to be endearingly funny. With its main character and his goo clone aside, Luigi's Mansion 3 is still bursting with personality. Where previous games suffered from a short adventure in a location or series of locations that managed to wear thin pretty quickly, the Last Resort Hotel is a joy to explore thanks to the sheer variety to be found on each of its floors. Now the game does play rather fast and loose with the term hotel and floor, as I can't remember the last hotel I stayed at that featured a 4-story garden on a single floor, but the variety is very much appreciated. You quickly leave the hotel's more mundane levels in favor of spooky themed levels like an Egyptian tomb, a pirate cove, and, spookiest of all, the gym! And they're all very detailed and feature their own uniquely appropriate music. Where previous games in the series had settings that could become a bit tiresome if you spent too much time in them, Luigi's Mansion 3 has something new and interesting to show you pretty regularly, and I can't think of any elements that didn't look or sound great, except for maybe the annoying low health sound effect which can burn in hell. Now in terms of gameplay, Luigi's Mansion 3 is a little more in line with its predecessors, though it does have a handful of new tricks up its sleeves. You're still spending the majority of your time capturing the various types of ghosts by stunning them with your flashlight and then playing a game of spectral tug-of-war as you try to suck them into your poltergust, but there are some pretty neat tools at your disposal. When it comes to actually capturing the ghosts, you've now got a slam move which lowers their health significantly, as well as allowing you to stun and damage groups of ghosts when you find yourself outnumbered. You're not able to slam them indefinitely, so there is a little bit of timing involved with using the slam effectively, especially when it comes to larger, stronger ghosts. Slam too early and you might find your target getting loose before you've captured them. In terms of exploration, you still have your dark light function which helps you find hidden objects, but you also have a new suction cup feature that allows you to latch onto flat, non-ghostly surfaces before slamming them to either remove obstacles or break them open. This also comes into play during ghost encounters too, whether it's used to distract normal ghosts by shooting a suction cup into their face, or as an attack against the game's possessed item enemies. You also have a little area of effect move that pushes ghosts and objects back, and it's useful for not only giving yourself some breathing room, but also to remove items that are able to protect ghosts from your flashlight. The burst attack also has a secondary function as something of a small directionless jump, which doesn't sound particularly useful at first, but it does allow you to dodge ground wave style attacks. Outside of dealing with ghosts, Luigi's Mansion 3 throws a number of clever environmental puzzles at you, and while many of them boil down to simply interacting with the right environmental element, Luigi's Mansion 3 is presented in such a way that it never feels like you're just messing with everything until the puzzle solves itself. Often, the game uses its fixed side-on camera angle to give you little glimpses of hidden items that can be revealed with your dark light, or cracks in walls that give you just the nudge you need to investigate certain areas further. None of these puzzles are ultimately that difficult, but I often found myself quietly impressed by the game's use of space and visuals when it comes to puzzles. With all that said, everything so far pales in comparison to the addition of GUIG, Luigi's animated goo clone who can do pretty much everything that Luigi can do except for walk in water, which dissolves it. GUIG is essentially used in one of two ways. Either you need to use it to access areas that Luigi can't, such as anything behind a grate or a mesh fence, or you need more than one set of hands for a job. Using GUIG is pretty straightforward as you transfer control between Lu and Gu at a click of the right analog stick, and as long as you aren't in combat you usually have more than enough time to maneuver both Ouijis. Later sequences will task you with coordinating them both to avoid damage to either party, but these instances are rather rare. I think the most interesting thing about GUIG isn't how the mechanic is implemented, but rather how Luigi's Mansion 3 goes about letting you discover its uses on your own. The game tells you what can be accomplished with GUIG at the outset, but leaves just enough unsaid, allowing you to learn the limits of GUIG's abilities by yourself. As soon as you unlock it, you'll know that GUIG can move through certain walls, but you might not know that it can slip through drains in the floor. Similarly, it's fairly obvious that you need GUIG to operate certain two-switch mechanisms, but the game doesn't spell out that two Ouijis can slam objects that are too heavy for a single Luigi. It's a refreshing approach to giving you new tools that kind of extends the discovery phase of using GUIG throughout most of the game, which kind of makes up for the game front-loading you with new abilities. Despite this skill front-loading, Luigi's Mansion 3 does use its various new skills to great effect throughout the game, but they're especially well implemented during the game's variety of inventive and fun boss fights. These encounters are well-rounded and exactly what you might expect from a classic boss fight, serving as a good test of the skills that the level prior has forced you to use, and design-wise they're all unique and full of character. Unfortunately, that front-loading of new abilities does mean that you're often encountering the same problems and solutions in the game's later encounters, with one encounter in particular being copy and pasted wholesale. Honestly, one of my few complaints with Luigi's Mansion 3 is that all of the new stuff is given to you within the first few hours of the game. The most notable ability you unlock later on, which upgrades your Poltergust's power, only really comes up once in the game's critical path and serves as more of a neat visual set piece than an actual mechanical change, which is ultimately a little disappointing. Less disappointing is your ability to play most of the game in co-op with a buddy taking control of GUIG, which honestly makes the game much easier, but hey, who doesn't love co-op? The game's later challenges that put both Ouijis in danger are neutered a little bit if two independent players are in control rather than one, but allowing a full co-op experience is definitely appreciated, especially when you consider that Nintendo tend to add weird asynchronous assist-style co-op modes that don't really add much for players who aren't young kids. Luigi's Mansion 3 also features a handful of multiplayer offerings beyond its co-op adventure mode. The Scream Park is the game's PvP suite featuring 3 minigames that make use of the game's core mechanics. There's one that pits players against one another to see who can catch more ghosts, while another tasks players with shooting targets with cannons using their poltergusts to load the cannons and chase off ghosts. The third mode puts players on inflatable rafts with the goal of collecting the most coins while avoiding explosive mines. All in all, the PvP suite is fine. It's not really worth buying the game for in its entirety, it's definitely not a Mario Party, but if you have a group of friends around, you could do far worse for entertainment. For those looking for a more cooperative affair, the Scarecraper tasks you and up to 7 companions with clearing out a certain number of floors in a set time limit. It's much less puzzle intensive than the main game, but again, it's still a rather enjoyable time. Like the game's PvP offerings, the Scarecraper isn't worth the price of entry on its own, but it is a nice side feature, and the online works pretty well. With 2 sets of multiplayer on offer in addition to a roughly 8 to 10 hour adventure if you only tackle the game's critical path, Luigi's Mansion 3 offers a decent amount of content. For those who like to squeeze every little bit out of the games that they buy, the single-player adventure also features collectible gems for each floor, as well as elusive boos that need to be hunted down, which can almost double the game's runtime if you're going for a full 100% run. The game is certainly nothing to sneeze at in terms of value for money, that's for sure. With that, Luigi's Mansion 3 is excellent. I've always enjoyed the Luigi's Mansion series, but 3 feels like the first of them to not really have any glaring issues. It's much longer than the first game, it has much more variety than the second game and doesn't rely on the 3DS control scheme, and is really just a delight to play. Catching ghosts is fast and satisfying, puzzles are often clever without being frustrating, and the way Luigi's Mansion 3 looks and sounds is just simply delightful. If you're a fan of the series, this is a must play, and if you're not really, Luigi's Mansion 3 might make a believer out of you.